Good morning from the vicarage here in Goosner on Wednesday for our reflection this midweek. And today I thought I'd focus on someone who the church remembers this day in its calendar, and that is George Fox, who died this day in 1691, 330 years ago, so a good while back. And sometimes it's easy to wonder why we remember ancient characters like that. Why aren't we remembering people more recently? And we do, and that's good. But we are this day remembering George Fox. Now, you may have come across him before, but if you haven't, he was the founder of the Society of Friends, more commonly known as the Quakers, but that's still its official title, the Society of Friends. And part of George Fox's inspiration in establishing the Quakers was a sense that we needed time and space to listen to God, to hear the Spirit of God speak to our hearts and our spirits in the middle of all the noise of every day. So if you go to a Quaker meeting, a good part of it is spent in silence, trying to still all the noise, all the stuff that's going on inside our heads that gets in the way of us hearing from God. And perhaps George Fox was inspired in part by the story of Elijah that you get in the Old Testament in 1 Kings from about 800 BC, in the time of King Ahab. And if you recall the story, Elijah had fled into the desert because Ahab was after his blood after the showdown on the mountain when he had the head-to-head contest with the prophets of Baal over the sacrifice of 2 bulls and who was really God. And Elijah had a lot of the prophets of Baal slaughtered as a result of it, and Ahab was after his blood, and he fled into the desert. And there in a cave, when it's possible from the way he was writing, he was actually quite profoundly depressed, that God met him. But before God met him, there were all sorts of natural things that went on. There was earthquakes, there was tempests, there was lightnings and fire, there was storm. And God wasn't in any of those great dramatic natural events. But the text goes on to tell us that after all of those, it was in the sound of a gentle silence that Elijah heard God's Spirit speaking in his spirit, and a commissioning for all that Elijah was to go on to do. But it was in the sound of a gentle silence that Elijah was enabled to hear God speak. And in today's world, the insight from Elijah and the insight from George Fox are really quite important, because our lives are filled with noise. From the moment that radio alarm goes off in the morning and wakes us up, through listening to whatever we listen to while we have breakfast, through all the noise of work and the other things we get up to during the day, and perhaps watching the television in the evening, and all the other bits and pieces that are part of our daily round. There is just so much noise. And even when we come to church with our worship, and there's nothing wrong with our worship, but we still find it hard to find time and space to hear God. We come with lots of requests. Please God this, and please God that, and please God the other. But silence to listen to God, we find that really quite challenging and quite difficult. And yet it is in the silence that all too often is when God speaks to us. And when we fill ourselves up with noise, we don't give God any time or any space. We're just not listening. And so it's really good to have a bit of time and space and silence, and make time and space and silence every day to listen to God. By all means, bring the prayers for the concerns of our hearts. By all means, find worship and other ways in which to praise God, but also find time and space and silence to listen for God speaking. Sometimes we need a bit of help. Sometimes it's useful to have something to focus on. So it might be a candle like I've got behind me, or a cross, or it might be an image, an icon of Jesus. It could be something out in the natural world that helps us, so that when whatever noise that happens in our head starts up, we can come back to that point of focus to bring ourselves back to the silence and try to listen to God. So I'm going to actually encourage you to go and do that. Perhaps take 5 or 10 minutes when this video stops, just in silence. And don't do it just today, but try doing it every day. And when you've taken silence, it's also good to come back to God in other ways too. And so along with this, there's going to be a link to the song Be Still, for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. So when you've taken your silence and when you've had time to listen to God and still your soul, then also you can join with the song if you wish. So let's be silent.